When my husband died, everyone thought the hardest part was over for me. They thought grief had broken me. What they didn't know was that I was watching everything. And by the time they realized I wasn't weak, it was already too late. When my husband died, people brought food, casseroles I didn't ask for, flowers that wilted faster than my heart healed, cars filled with words that sounded kind but felt distant. Everyone told me the same thing. You're so strong. You'll be okay. He's in a better place. I nodded. I thanked them. I smiled. When it was expected, but inside, something had gone very quiet. For 42 years. My life had moved to the rhythm of another person. Not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily like a clock you don't notice until it stops. And when it stopped, the silence was unbearable. At night, I still reached for his side of the bed. In the mornings, I still listened for his footsteps in the hallway. Even weeks later, I caught myself setting out 2 cups instead of 1. Grief didn't make me loud. It made me invisible. The funeral passed in blur. People hugged me too tightly. Others avoided my eyes completely. My husband's family stayed close. Closer than usual. At first, I thought it was love, support, but then I noticed the questions. Not how are you feeling? But what are you going to do now? Not do you need company? But have you thought about selling the house? They watched me carefully, the way people do when they think you're fragile. I kept my answers simple. Taking things one day at a time. That sentence became my shield. My husband had always handled the visible things, bills, repairs, phone calls, but what most people never saw was this. I handled the planning. I knew where everything was. Every document, every account. Every promise we made to each other in quiet conversations late at night. Still, no one asked me what I knew. They assumed, and assumptions are dangerous. A week after the funeral, my sister-in-law invited herself over. She sat at my kitchen table like she belonged there. Like this wasn't the same place where my husband and I had shared breakfast every morning for decades. You shouldn't be alone so much, she said. Gently, I stirred my tea. I'm managing, I replied. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, she continued, there are things you don't need to worry about anymore. We can help. Help. That word sounded different now. From that day on, the visits increased. Someone always had advice, suggestions, opinions. They spoke slowly to me, repeated themselves, explained simple things as if I couldn't follow. I let them, because grief had taught me something important. People reveal their intentions when they think you aren't paying attention. One afternoon, I overheard something that changed everything. I was in the hallway when voices drifted from the living room. She won't question it, someone said. She barely talks anymore, another replied. She's not the same. I stood still, not shaking, not crying, listening. That was the moment I understood the truth. They didn't see a widow. They saw an opportunity. That night, I sat alone in the dark. I thought about my husband, about the life we built slowly, carefully, honestly. And I made a decision. I would let them keep thinking I was weak. Asterisk because sometimes strength is best used quietly. The days after the funeral moved slowly. I woke each morning to the same quiet house, the same empty hallway, yet nothing felt the same. His family started visiting more often, always checking in. They said, always offering help, they claimed. At first I welcomed them. Asterisk polite smiles. Short conversations, tea, a few minutes of companionship. Asterisk, but soon the questions became more pointed. Asterisk not about my grief or how I was coping, not about memories of my husband. It was about control. Asterisk accounts, bills, legal papers. The house. My late husband's legacy. Asterisk one afternoon. My brother-in-law came by with a stack of papers. Asterisk he leaned casually against the kitchen counter, smiling. Asterisk, but there was an edge to him. Hadn't noticed before. Asterisk, you might want to consider letting us help with these, he said. Asterisk, I'm sure it's all overwhelming right now. Asterisk I stirred my tea. Slowly. Asterisk I can manage. I replied softly. He nodded, but I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe me. Asterisk they never do when they think someone is weak. Then came the small incidents. A suggestion to reorganize the finances I hadn't asked for. A casual remark about downsizing the home I hadn't mentioned. A decision made without asking, just because they assumed I wouldn't notice. Asterisk I noticed. Every single time. I let them think I didn't. Smiled when I should have frowned. Asterisk I nodded when I wanted to shake my head. Asterisk because I knew. Watching quietly gave me power. Asterisk one evening I overheard a conversation in a hallway. Asterisk two voices. Low, careful. Asterisk. She won't question anything, one said. Asterisk. She's barely herself anymore. The other replied. Asterisk. She's weaker than we thought. Asterisk. I held my breath, listening, not out of fear, out of clarity. That was when I understood everything. Grief had changed me. Yes, but not in the way they assumed. I spent that night reviewing every document, every account, every agreement my husband and I had ever signed. The details were painstaking. Numbers were endless. The responsibility was mine, yet I didn't panic. I didn't argue. I didn't act. Asterisk I planned. Asterisk, and I knew that when the time was right, they would see that the woman they thought weak was far from it. The next week, their movements became bolder. Asterisk a subtle remark here, a friendly suggestion there. Asterisk one of them even assumed I hadn't noticed a change in the insurance papers. I allowed it. Every tiny overstep, every careless assumption, I noticed silently. Asterisk because in this house, every mistake they made would become my advantage. Asterisk. The crucial part of this silence was perception. They thought grief had rendered me invisible. They thought I was slow, fragile, and trusting. I let them believe it, and slowly, they lowered their guard. Asterisk by the end of part 2, I had realized something important. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't acting out of anger. Asterisk I was reclaiming my life. Asterisk one quiet, careful, intentional step at a time. Asterisk they would soon discover that strength doesn't always announce itself with noise. Weeks passed. The quiet house became a stage for their assumptions. Asterisk every morning. I made the tea. Every morning, I noticed the little changes, the subtle rearrangement of papers, the almost imperceptible suggestions left in my mailbox. They believed I hadn't noticed, and that was their first mistake. It happened on a Tuesday. I was reviewing a pile of bills on the dining table when I saw it. Asterisk a letter, stamped official, had been opened. Asterisk the envelope was slightly bent. The corner folded. Not mine. I held it carefully. Reading the contents. Asterisk it was a notice from the bank. They had applied for partial control of my late husband's accounts. Without my consent, I sat back, letting the paper rest in my hands. Silence stretched for a long moment. Then I smiled. Asterisk. They had made the second mistake. Asterisk assuming that I was naive, or incapable, or too weak to respond. Asterisk that evening, I invited one of the instigators to tea. Asterisk they came in, confident, smiling, as if expecting gratitude. Asterisk. You're too quiet, they said. You need someone to help. I smiled back. Yes, I am quiet, I said softly. But quiet has its advantages. They frowned, confused by my calm tone. Advantages? They asked. I poured the tea, letting the steam curl between us. Yes, I said. Because it allows you to see things clearly, and to prepare for when it matters most. Asterisk after that evening, they became even bolder. Asterisk they assumed I would not check every document. Asterisk they assumed I would accept verbal assurances instead of written ones. Asterisk they assumed that grief had dulled my attention. Asterisk but I was paying attention. Every meeting, every suggestion, every friendly advice, I recorded it all in my mind. Asterisk notes on paper. Asterisk observations filed away quietly, meticulously. They were giving me all the evidence I would need. One Sunday, my daughter-in-law visited. She didn't knock. She didn't wait to be invited. Asterisk. She entered the house as if it belonged to her. Asterisk. I thought you might like some company, she said. I looked at her calmly. Of course, I replied. Asterisk and I watched her as she made herself comfortable, speaking in soft tones that sounded like care but were really commands. Asterisk. You know, you really shouldn't handle these accounts alone, she said. I nodded. Yes. Perhaps, I said slowly, and I let her talk. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp on. Asterisk I spread out every paper, every bank statement, every note my husband and I had ever made. I mapped every account, traced every bill. I calculated every transaction. I realized that I had everything I needed. Asterisk they had assumed I was weak. Asterisk they had assumed I would not notice. Asterisk they had assumed I would let them take control. They were wrong. In the days that followed, I made subtle adjustments. Asterisk I contacted lawyers I trusted. I asked questions they would never think to ask. I verified documents, cross-checked statements, and prepared contingencies, all while keeping the same calm demeanor in front of them. Every misstep they made, every assumption they held, was being quietly turned into advantage. The days grew heavier, not because of grief, but because of their assumptions. Asterisk they started to move faster now, thinking my silence meant submission. Little by little, they tested boundaries. One morning, I discovered that a utility bill had been tampered with, not maliciously at least. Not yet, but enough to make it seem like I had missed a payment, they assumed I wouldn't notice. I smiled quietly to myself. Later that afternoon, my daughter-in-law came by again, She carried herself with the air of someone who had already claimed authority over my home. Have you considered moving some of the accounts to a joint plan? She asked. I paused, looked at her steadily. I'll think about it, I said softly. That phrase, I'll think about it, became my shield. They assumed indecision, weakness, hesitation. But in reality, I was strategizing. That night, I went through every document again. I cross-checked all statements, noting discrepancies. Every visit they made, every comment, every suggestion, I recorded it mentally and on paper. By the time I finished, I had a full map of their intentions. They wanted access, wanted control. They wanted me to seem powerless so that I would cede authority willingly. I let them try. Then came the first bold move. One morning, I found a check addressed to the bank, signed by someone else, intended to be deposited into my late husband's account, without my knowledge. I stared at it for a long moment, heart calm, mind clear. They thought I was incapable of acting. I didn't panic. I didn't shout. I didn't confront them. I called the bank instead. The banker's voice was neutral, professional, unaware of the family drama that lay beneath the paper. Ma'am, we noticed a recent attempt to deposit a check without proper authorization, he said. I listened carefully. Yes, I replied calmly. Thank you for letting me know. Please hold any transactions until I review the account fully. Click. They didn't know I had contacted the bank already. They didn't know I had planned for this. And that was the power of quiet observation. In the following days, I began creating a system. Every financial transaction had a note. Every suggestion from family was checked. Every movement in the accounts was documented. They continued to push. Let them believe they were in control. And slowly, each mistake they made became a tool I could use. One evening, my brother-in-law visited again. He leaned against the counter, speaking with a tone that assumed superiority. You know, we're only trying to help, he said. I smiled at him warmly. Yes, I replied softly. And I appreciate that, truly. He didn't see it. But I had already adjusted the accounts, verified everything, and created a layer of protection he could not touch. The days stretched into weeks, and as they tried more brazenly, I observed, waited, and planned. Their belief that grief had made me weak was their fatal mistake. For every action they took, I had an equal or greater plan in motion. The weeks turned into months, and their confidence grew because they thought I was fragile, distracted by grief, too silent to notice their moves. They were wrong. Had learned long ago that strength is often quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It waits, observes, calculates. I was waiting for the right moment. It started with small changes I implemented without them. Knowing, I shifted my accounts, reorganized bills, double-checked investments, ensured that every move they made was recorded, every suggestion, every assumption, every casual remark. They were creating the path I needed to reclaim everything. One morning, my daughter-in-law arrived with her usual confident smile. Asterisk, I thought you might like to discuss the house plans today, she said casually. I looked at her with calm eyes. Yes, we can discuss them, I replied softly, but let's take our time. Asterisk, she frowned. Confusion flickered in her expression. I had never rushed. I had never pressured. I had simply prepared. By now, they had begun underestimating me openly. Asterisk comments intended to belittle, suggestions meant to manipulate, requests designed to test my patience. All of them misjudged my quiet resolve. I let it happen. One afternoon, I received a call from the bank. Asterisk, ma'am, there was an attempt to withdraw funds without your authorization, the teller said. I smiled softly to myself. Yes, I replied. Please hold all transactions until I review the accounts fully. Click. They had no idea that I had already spoken to the bank, reviewed statements, and secured all access. Asterisk, their assumptions that grief had made me weak had been my greatest advantage. Asterisk, I started planning my final step, not with anger, but with clarity. Asterisk, every meeting, every visit, every helpful suggestion they had made became part of my strategy. I didn't need confrontation, didn't need to yell. I didn't even need to explain myself. The quiet preparation would speak louder than words. Asterisk. Then came the day they tried something bold. Asterisk, a meeting at my kitchen table where they assumed they could pressure me into signing documents that would give them access to everything. Asterisk, I listened as they spoke, nodding politely, letting them believe I was overwhelmed. Asterisk, and then, when they had laid out their plan fully, I calmly set down my cup of tea. I've reviewed everything, I said softly. I appreciate your concern, but all decisions regarding my late husband's estate will be handled my way. Their faces went pale, confusion, disbelief, panic, all in one expression. Asterisk, they had assumed weakness. I had shown strength. I had taken control without drama. Asterisk, without confrontation. Asterisk, without revealing that I had already anticipated every move. Asterisk, and as they realized they no longer had influence, the atmosphere shifted. Silence replaced their confidence. Distance replaced their assumptions. Asterisk, and I felt, for the first time since his passing, peace. The weeks that followed my quiet assertion of control were tense. Asterisk, they no longer spoke openly about taking over my affairs, but their glances, their half-smiles, and the carefully measured words were unmistakable. They were planning their next move. One evening, my brother-in-law came to the house unannounced. Asterisk, he leaned against the doorway, casual but tense. I just wanted to check if everything's all right, he said. I nodded slowly. Asterisk, yes, everything is fine, I replied calmly. He shifted uncomfortably. I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed, he added, trying to sound helpful. I smiled faintly. Not at all, I said. I have everything under control. He looked at me with a mixture of surprise and hesitation. I knew then that he had expected weakness. Asterisk, the next day, my daughter-in-law called. Asterisk, she spoke in a polite, measured tone, but I could hear the subtle edge of frustration beneath it. Asterisk, I just wanted to make sure you're managing everything properly, she said. Asterisk, I responded slowly, carefully, every word deliberate. Asterisk, yes. I'm managing. And I appreciate your concern. Asterisk, her pause on the other end of the line said it. All, asterisk, she had thought I might falter under the weight of responsibility. Asterisk, she had thought I might allow her influence. They were wrong. Spent the following days quietly reinforcing boundaries. Every document was reviewed. Every bank account double-checked. Asterisk, every suggestion from family members carefully considered before action. Asterisk, and I began documenting everything, not out of anger, but out of foresight. Asterisk, every conversation, every attempt at manipulation, every small overstep, it was all recorded. Asterisk, because one day they would need to understand that strength is measured not by noise, but by patience and clarity. Asterisk, one afternoon, I overheard a conversation between my daughter-in-law and another relative. Asterisk, they think she doesn't notice. They said, asterisk, she's just sitting quietly. She won't challenge anything. Asterisk, I leaned against the wall, listening. Asterisk, a quiet smile touched my lips. Asterisk, they had no idea that I had already anticipated every move. Asterisk, they had no idea that their assumptions were the very thing that had given me the advantage. Asterisk, the subtle retaliation they attempted after that meeting was almost laughable. Asterisk, a suggestion disguised as kindness. Asterisk, a question framed as concern. Asterisk, every time I responded with calm words, polite tones, and a quiet confidence that unsettled them more than any confrontation ever could. Asterisk, they were learning, too late, that strength does not need to be allowed to be undeniable. By now they were on edge. Asterisk, the subtle hints, the quiet assertions, the polite but firm refusals, all of it had unsettled them. They had expected compliance. They had expected hesitation. They had expected weakness. Instead, they found a woman who was watching, calculating, and patiently reclaiming her life. Asterisk, it started with small tests. Asterisk, a question about the bank accounts. Asterisk, a suggestion about selling the house. Asterisk, a remark about moving possessions. Asterisk, I listened calmly to each one, nodding politely, asking measured questions, never revealing my full awareness. Asterisk, inside I was preparing. Asterisk, every detail recorded, every move anticipated. Then came the boldest move yet. They assumed they could convince me to give them partial access to my husband's estate. Asterisk, they presented papers signed by someone else in the family, hoping I would hesitate. I looked at them calmly. I appreciate your concern, I said softly, but all decisions regarding these matters will be handled on my terms. Asterisk, their faces went pale. Asterisk, shock and disbelief flickered in their eyes. They had assumed weakness. I had shown strength. Asterisk, in the following days, their subtle manipulations became desperation. Asterisk, a phone call with advice I didn't need. Asterisk, a visit to help with things I had already completed. Asterisk, a message that assumed I had forgotten details I had memorized months ago. Every attempt was met with calm observation. Every assumption was quietly countered. Asterisk, every overstep carefully documented. Asterisk, the turning point came quietly. Asterisk, one afternoon, my brother-in-law tried to argue a point about the house, thinking I would acquiesce. Asterisk, I stood slowly, placed my hands on the table, and spoke with calm authority. Asterisk, I've reviewed everything. I understand your intentions, but the decisions have been made. All matters will be handled according to my plans. The room fell silent. He looked around, trying to find someone else to support him. No one spoke. No one challenged me. Asterisk, for the first time. They realized they had underestimated me completely. Asterisk, I did not gloat. I did not confront them further. I simply continued with my life. Quietly confident, fully in control. Asterisk, their desperation became obvious. Their assumptions transparent. Asterisk, and my strength, calm and deliberate, became undeniable. The house had grown quiet again, but this time it was different. Not the heavy, painful quiet of grief. Not the tense quiet of people assuming I was fragile. This was the quiet of control reclaimed, of strength understood, of peace restored. In the days following the final confrontation, the subtle tension lifted. No more unsolicited advice. No more bold attempts to influence my decisions. No more tests of my patience or awareness. They had realized, finally, that I was not weak, that I had observed every move, anticipated every attempt, and quietly reclaimed my life. One afternoon, my daughter-in-law called. I just wanted to make sure everything is all right, she said, her voice quieter than before. I smiled softly. Yes, everything is perfectly fine, I replied, and I appreciate your concern. There was a pause on the other end. Understand, she said finally. It was the acknowledgement I had waited for, not confrontation, not apology, just recognition. I spent that evening walking through the house, my hands grazing the furniture my husband and I had chosen together, my eyes lingering on the photographs of our life. I realized something important. Strength isn't loud. Strength doesn't need to be visible. Strength waits quietly, watches carefully, and acts deliberately, and sometimes the world underestimates it until it's too late. In the following weeks, life began to return to a rhythm I had long known, and I handled my finances with clarity, organized my home with intention, reconnected with old friends who respected my independence. The house was no longer a stage for others' assumptions. It was a home again, mine, reclaimed, protected, peaceful. Every attempt to undermine me had been a lesson. They had assumed silence meant weakness. They had assumed grief meant distraction. They had assumed I would yield. They were wrong. Months later, I saw them at a family gathering. Their expressions were cautious, respectful, hesitant. You seem strong, one said quietly. I smiled, warmth in my eyes, calm in my voice. Yes, I said softly. I am. No explanation. No argument. No need. My life, my strength, my choices all spoke louder than words ever could. The lesson I carried forward was simple. Never underestimate the quiet, patient, observant person. They see more. They know more. And when the time comes, their strength is undeniable. I had survived grief. I had survived manipulation, had survived assumptions and subtle betrayals. And in the end, I had reclaimed my life completely, not with anger, not with confrontation, but with quiet, deliberate strength.